Today we're talking about making back to homeschool stress-free. And so I want to share what we do in our homeschool and sort of how we came about it and why we do it and why it works. And the thing that we do, basically in a nutshell, is that we start our homeschool year really early and we start really slowly, gradually. So we actually started this week on Monday. And we are officially back to homeschool. And the reason why we do that is because I start our homeschool year with just one subject in our homeschool day. And then we add in a new subject, usually about once a week, until we have our full homeschool schedule planned. So before we started our homeschool year, I sat down and I made a list of everything that I wanted us to accomplish during our homeschool day, all the subjects that I was planning on teaching my kids this year. And then we have been adding those subjects in and we'll continue to add those subjects in just one subject at a time over the course of about a week. So for the first week here, we're going to do just one subject. And then probably next week, we'll add in one more thing. The week after that, one more thing. And we'll keep adding in subjects until we have our full homeschool day. And there are several reasons why I do this. This is actually something that we've done now for the last couple of years, and it has worked so well in our homeschool. And the reasons why are because I really have two main goals for my kids at the beginning of the school year, and actually neither of them has anything to do with academics. So when I'm starting my school year, my first goal for my kids, and really my most important goal, is that I want homeschool to be super fun for them. I want them to absolutely love what we're doing. I want us to have just great, really fun lessons. And I want them to remember, or if you're a new homeschooler, you'd want them to learn that homeschool is a great time. It's a lot of fun. So yesterday was our first day. We kicked it off with a really fun science experiment that my kids absolutely loved. And that was a lot of fun. And so my goal here is just to give them a really strong, positive first impression for what we're doing in our homeschool, what we're learning. And I want them to be really excited to be back to school. So this, I'm hoping, is going to carry forward into the months ahead, because I know that there's going to come a time, it seems like it comes every winter, usually around February or early March for us, where it's just cold, it's snowy, it's winter. In where we live, we get a lot of snow, so it gets really cold and dark that time of year. My husband has a seasonal job where he works a lot of hours between the months of January and April. So we have really long days at home, just me and the kids, and it seems like those months go on forever. And so I've noticed over the last few years that motivation for homeschool always starts off really high in the fall, and then by the time we get to like the middle of the winter, my kids are less excited about it than they were in the fall. And so my goal is to start off really strong, to start off with a really positive first experience during those first few months, because I want that momentum and that excitement and that positive first impression to carry forward throughout the year. So my first primary goal for my kids during these first few weeks is to make it as fun as possible. And then my second goal for my kids is to really focus on building our routines. So I want my kids by the end of those first few weeks to totally understand what I expect of them behavior wise and expectation wise and routine wise during our homeschool, so that they are totally clear about how that's going to look. And that actually is a holdover for me from something that I learned as a classroom teacher. I've shared in the past my background, so I spent a little over a decade in the classrooms before I came home and had my kids. And one of the things that I learned as a classroom teacher from experience, unfortunately, was that it is so much easier to be a little bit more strict at the beginning of the school year and then sort of let things slide as the year goes on than it is to be a little bit more lax at the beginning and then try to tighten up the rules mid-year. It is really hard, almost impossible, to like recreate these routines once your kids are more set in stone with the routines at the beginning of the year. And so it really helps as much as possible to be very consistent about those routines at the beginning and to make sure that your kids really understand what your expectations are for them. So talking about things like how are they going to focus on their work when they're working, and what are they going to do, what are they going to do as they're learning. So those are kinds of things that I'm thinking about, making sure that we're really consistent with those routines and just creating something that I'm going to be okay with if it happens all year long. Okay, so we were talking about why we start early and start slowly, and I was saying that the reasons are because we want to really concentrate on making it fun, and because we want to concentrate on having those great routines for my kids during those first few weeks and really building those. And so when I'm not trying to get us through an entire day full of lesson plans at the very beginning, then that really helps me to be able to have the freedom to take the time that we need to really concentrate on those routines. Because I know for myself that if I know that we have a whole huge list of stuff that we need to get through today, then I am a lot more likely to let something slide in terms of my kids' behavior or in terms of it not going exactly the way that I want to. But on the first day that we did our homeschool this year, I was reading out loud to my kids, and they were not paying attention, and they were making noises, and they were trying to talk to each other, and they kept interrupting me like every second sentence to tell me something or to tell each other something. And I do allow a certain amount of like conversation to happen. I think that's one of the benefits of homeschooling, because my kids can be a little bit more free to share what they're thinking as we're reading than they could be if they were part of a classroom of 30. But I'm not comfortable with them interrupting me every 6 words to tell me something. And so I was able to stop that lesson several times and review with them what my expectations are when I'm reading out loud to them. And today it went much better because my kids remembered that. We reviewed those expectations at the beginning, right before we started reading, and we were able to get through our lessons a lot better this morning because we had had that time yesterday to really stop and review. And I know that I would have gone crazy if we had been like that all year. So I'm really glad that we took the time at the beginning and that we had the time to be able to stop and review those things. Another thing that's really helpful if you start slowly is it gives you time as a teacher to really observe and reflect and make any changes as they happen. So we always plan out what curriculum we're going to use before the school year starts. I would imagine you've probably done that too, or maybe you're in the process of doing it. But I know for us, there's almost always at least one curriculum where I think it's going to be great, and then we get started using it, and then it just isn't at all what I expected it to be. And I'm getting better at being able to tell that in advance now that we've been homeschooling for a while. But it's still, sometimes there's ones that we try that just, they don't work the way that I thought they were going to, or it ends up being really different once we get started. And so if we're not starting every single curriculum on the same day, it gives me some time to really understand how each curriculum works before we add in to another one. So we're starting with just one, and during the time that we're doing just that one, I'm really taking the time to read the introduction in the teacher's guide and make sure that I really understand how that curriculum is laid out and how it's designed to be used and what kinds of resources are available to us as we're using it, and just really understanding the curriculum. And then I'm also taking some time to observe my kids and to see how it's going for them, to see how they're liking it, and to see how they're understanding it. Is it paced right for them? Are we going too slow and they're bored? Or is it moving too fast and they're confused? Or are they doing okay? And all of those kinds of observations and things will help us to be able to be more effective with the curriculum going forward. Okay, so that's why we really try to take the time to just do one curriculum at a time. And then as we're adding in a little bit more the next week, I'll take some time to really focus on that next curriculum. But usually by the time we've spent a week doing it, we've worked out most of the kinks and really started to understand how this curriculum is going to work for our family. And so that is really helpful in terms of just giving me the time that I need, as well as my kid's teacher, to really understand how to use the curriculum. So that's what we do. It has taken a lot of the stress and pressure off of homeschool because there's not a lot of pressure to do a lot of stuff really well and really exciting on the very first day. Because the first day is basically the same as the summer, but just with like, I don't know, 20 or 30 minutes of a homeschool lesson. And that's the same for the entire week. And then the second week, we're just adding one more thing to what we've already done. So rather than having this big giant transition, it is much more gradual. And I found that that works really well for my kids too, because they're used to a lot more of the freedom that they have during the summer. And once the school year starts, they have a lot less freedom and a lot more structure. And so having that gradual transition for them is also really helpful because they are able to sort of ease back into the school year without having that abrupt transition from, hours of playtime to hours of school. Although we really don't do. I mean, our school day is pretty short. So, those are sort of my biggest thoughts about how we do our back to homeschool. If you have questions about that or about how to get started with homeschool this year, please feel free to leave those in the comments. I would love to answer them. I hope you enjoyed this video, which was recorded live in the Homeschool Reading Community Group. This is a free Facebook group where I share tips and advice about homeschooling and teaching reading. You'll also find community with other homeschool moms like you, plus freebies, giveaways, parties, and more. I would love for you to join us over at the Homeschool Reading Community. Make sure that you check out the link in the description of this video for all the details.